When I was in high school, during my last 2 years in high school, I also took classes at a local community college to help my advancement. And I took a writing course. And I remember it was a fantastic writing course. I should have thought it was terrible because it was on a Saturday. It was like from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. It was like 3 hours on my Saturday morning, and I'm like 16 years old with a bunch of older people in this class, right? But I loved it. It was a great class. The teacher was great. And it was a class on persuasive writing. And it talked about how any good writer always sees the counterpoints to their points, right? And I think that applies to research and it applies to data science, right? So I'm on board with 2020 and this spike, right? But what about here? What about here? What about here? There were spikes then too, right? What about this? Why was there a spike in 2022? And then generally speaking, the stock market and gold has done very, very well since the pandemic, right? I mean, if you look at the stocks and the gold growth since 2020, since the pandemic, it's been like a rocket, right? It's been incredible. So why would there have been this spike in 2022? Again, this is kind of where you have to apply a little bit of your own local knowledge, right? Your own interests, your own hypothesis that you're willing to put out there. So to me, I would say, well, look, I know that most of you around the world aren't going to realize this, but in the US, there has been an increase of people retiring because since the pandemic, their retirement portfolio, their retirement assets have done so well that some people have said, hey, this is it. Like, I'm of the appropriate age. My stock portfolio has done well. I have some money saved up. I'm retiring. There's been an increase in people saying that. But again, that's me applying my own local knowledge, my own research, right? So maybe I would do a paper or an article around, what about here, 2022? Maybe 2022 was a big year for retirements. And people wanted to move some of their money into gold, right? So as Fatima says, maybe turn to gold as a safe haven asset during times of economic instability. Well, yeah, but couldn't they also move it during times of retirement? Maybe, right? I'm retired. I want things to be a little bit more stable in my portfolio, right? Because now I have to live off this money. Maybe more people got into gold to kind of, flatten out their portfolio and retire. Right? Maybe that explains that spike. And I would say that maybe some of these, the negative spikes like these, have been caused by people saying, okay, well, the pandemic is over. I'm going to go back to stocks. And if you would have bought Nvidia back then, right, you'd be doing really well right now, right? Or something like that. So, maybe there's a little bit of an ebb and flow here to economic times or to retirement times. Right? Because I think you could write a paper on that, right? Why did this spike happen? And can you tie it back to retirements? That's your hypothesis, right? That the gold market in 2022 was supported by an increase in retirements. That doesn't sound like a bad hypothesis to me. Now go and prove it, right? So yeah, I think we're making very reasonable statements, but you gotta have an explanation for these spikes. Because what about this one here? That's Q3 of 2019. That's like what, at least 4 months before the pandemic, right? Why did that one happen? So you'd have to be prepared with those counterpoints if you want to make the same points that we just made in the chat, right? Like you'd have to be prepared for that. All right, so let's look at Asia because there's a lot of mentions of China in this report, right? So let me put Asia over here so you can see the previous items earlier. Yassine says, I think what can help in coming up with hypothesis is delving deeper into the data, like look at buyers by new categories, like by region and by age. Ah, okay. Okay, cool. I'm on board with that. We might just get to that. That's part of what I want to do. But let's look at another region, right? Let's look at Asia. What do you guys see for Asia? Give me your observations on Asia here. So we're looking at the pink boxes. What do you guys think? Yassine says, I'm going to say that many times it goes against the trend. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? So I'm not surprised that there's not a lot of answers. Maybe some of you are catching on to this, or maybe you just can't express it. But remember that in this chart, the size of the box speaks to the magnitude, right? Which means that all the boxes are kind of relative to each other, right? So yeah, Voldemort says in 2024 they are having highest numbers in comparison to others. Yeah, Voldemort. That's exactly where I'm going with this. But if we look at these boxes, right, and remember that they're all relative to each other, not necessarily by where they are on the chart, just relative to each other, right? So even though this pink box, I can't even hide, there it is. This pink box is way down here. It's only minus 4.74. Just like this one down here is only minus 11.49, even though it's down below, right? So my assessment on this is, where's the variance? Like all the boxes, again, relative to each other, are basically the same. Not a lot of variance in that market, right? Now, Voldemort's right, 2024, right? For some reason in Q2 2024, there was a spike. But generally speaking, looking at everything else, where's the variance? And, if you think about your statistics courses or other things you've taken, variance makes for good studies, right? Not that you can't study low variance data, but it helps, right? So that's another type of observation you should be making. Not all data is good data, right? But I mean, like for me, that's kind of like it's a shoulder shrug for me, right? Like where's the variance? Like what am I going to study?